If I steal your car,
Yep.
you don't have a car anymore.
True.
If I steal your code base, though, you've still got a code base, but
Yep.
we would still call that theft. So what does that tell us about the ways that let's call it the physics of software,
Yeah.
kind of break our understanding and our mental model of capitalism and capitalist incentives?
Yeah. Yeah. This is what we brought up at the end of our last episode.
Yeah.
Or I shoved it in there.
It was a great question. And I want you to have first word, but I think it's important for us to align maybe on a definition of capitalism.
Yeah.
And I printed out a couple notes just because there are some details that I think are actually important, and it depends on whose definition you look at.
Yeah.
But like the top line is usually the one that first comes to most people's mind is private ownership and control of the means of production. So capital, goods, resources, intellectual property, et cetera.
Yeah.
Another really important one that is sometimes segmented as, quote, free market capitalism as a flavor of capitalism is market-based allocation of resources. So the market decides who gets paid.
Yep.
Based on some criteria, usually, hopefully, competition, who makes the best product or service for the best price.
Yeah. Value generation.
Yep.
Like wherever value generation happens, that's where capital will flow.
Yep.
That's generally what is thought to be meant by that.
Yep. We also have, this is I think Friedrich Hayek school of thought attribute, but that there's information in the price of things. So the price of goods and services is actually signaling information about the differential value or scarcity of that price or service.
Yep.
Profit as a motive or a primary driver of economic activity. Capital accumulation with the purpose of reinvestment is an interesting thing there. Wage labor as a dominant form of economic participation, that actually is a little fringier because I think there are purer forms of capitalism that may not involve that, especially once we start talking about automation and AI, but let's put a pin in that one. And then all of this is theoretically kind of underpinned by legal frameworks that protect private property and enforce contracts. And it's really, really important. I've been in arguments more often than I'd like to say, and I want to be clear as I set the table for this little debate. Capitalism does not equal sign markets or commerce.
Yep.
Markets and commerce are, let's call them primitives or building blocks of capitalism. They are big parts of capitalism, but they pre-existed the formal understanding of capitalism by thousands of years. There have been markets. I mean, there are clay tablets that account for how many barrels of beer someone sold someone in Sumeria 7,000 years ago. So that's it. First of all, do you agree or disagree with any of those points before we?
No, I think that's a pretty fair set of definitions for what we're talking about.
Cool. I've said my piece. Take it away. How does software exist within this framework?
Yeah, I think the most obvious piece where the conflict happens, in my mind, like we talk about code smells, right, in software engineering.
Code smells? I don't think I've ever heard of code smells.
You never heard of a code smell before? Okay, so a code smell is when a piece of code is structured in such a way where it's just kind of janky. Like it's not even necessarily you can like put your finger on why it looks wrong, but it's a smell. It's like this is going to cause it's an instinct that this is going to cause problems later.
So it's a vibe.
A little bit.
Okay.
It can be. There's some definitions of things that are definitely code smells. Like if your function is getting too long, right, would be a code smell. If you start to copy and if you find yourself copying and pasting logic in different places, that's a code smell where you should maybe start to refactor to like put it all in one place.
So these are like heuristics that are part of the software development process that are almost like lore amongst.
Yeah. It's the rules of thumb that can be. You can call them code smells.
I've never heard of that, but I love it.
So when I say what I'm gonna say is that a thing like DRM, digital rights management, to me is the code smell of this dynamic.
Which dynamic?
Of that there's some incompatibility between software and how software is able to deliver sometimes specifically content, but generally like on a bunch of different things. That it's just there's something broken about how the intersection is happening. I have a feeling, to be clear, I haven't, and this is part of what's going to be fun about today and sort of exploring this idea. I have a feeling that there is some incompatibility between software and our current day understanding of capitalism and the resource allocation that it provides and all that stuff. Rather than we're just not doing it right yet. I don't know, but let's dive into it.
Well, I think there are a couple of obvious things that could be signs that what you're saying is true. The most obvious one is that most property ownership, land, cows, bicycles, involve atoms that are scarce in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
They may not even be made out of scarce atoms.
Yeah.
But their configuration in a bicycle,
and that's where what I was talking about with the resource allocation stuff,
right?
For it. Because at its core, any economic system, right, is supposed to decide how scarce resources are dispersed throughout the society.
Exactly, right? And they're at least temporarily zero sum, and by that I mean a bicycle shop can only stock so many bicycles, and if enough people go in and buy all the bicycles, there will be no more bicycles, at least until the next shipment of bicycles arrives.
And then if you go down to the individual unit, like when you own the bicycle, you have a monopoly on that bicycle. Yeah. It's not my bicycle. I can borrow it if you let me, but you're the one who decides that, right? Like,
you can also resell it and it has some plausible resale value.
Sure. Yeah. And that's pretty straightforward, I think, makes sense, right? Like there's physical things. There are only so many of the physical things. And at any given moment, somebody has a monopoly on the physical thing.
Yep.
Whether that's a company, whether that's a person, whatever, it doesn't matter. One person owns it, one entity owns it, and it can't belong to anybody else at that moment.
And of course, software doesn't work this way. Is that self-evident, or do we think we need to go into it?
Maybe we should explain why, right? So what I was talking about with DRM, so digital rights management. So DRM at its core, the whole function of it is to say, let's use Netflix as an example. Netflix has content that people pay Netflix for access to it, right? What Netflix doesn't want you to do is to be able to take the content that you've paid for to have access to and keep it for yourself beyond the time that you're paying them.
Yeah, it's a time-bound license.
It's a time-bound license to be able to view the content that they own. Now, the way that they do that is they have these elaborate systems called digital rights management systems that try to lock the actual bits that represent the image on the screen and the audio that you're hearing from your computer in a time-bound way, right? Where it's like if you don't have the access to the system that lets you read those bits, then you're not supposed to be able to read them. But at the end of the day, one, they make it very difficult for people who actually pay for the software. They make it difficult for people that are paying to actually get the best version of the experience that you can get, right? Which is like, you have to install proprietary software. You have to be using their specific, you have to be using a specific browser. There's all kinds of restrictions on how you can experience that content. The DRM systems for Netflix, they basically give Netflix the ability to say, I only want people to be able to view this content as long as they're paying us. And there's no way to access the content outside of that. There's a variety of different ways that it works. Some of it involves encrypting the content with like a time-locked key, so that if you are outside of the time window that you're supposed to be able to view the content, then it won't let you anymore. But what you end up with is a system where there are better experiences that users could have if the DRM wasn't there, but there's no other option to view the content without the DRM. Yeah. Now, what's weird about that is that at some point, the bits that represent the content, the video that you're watching, the audio that you're watching, are going to be on your computer.
Yeah.
Which means that there's theoretically nothing keeping you from just recording those bits and then keeping it for yourself and watching it later. Netflix really doesn't want you to do that. In fact, they would prefer that it was criminally illegal, but I don't think we've crossed that line yet. But what I guess what I don't really understand is, and what I'm struggling with is like trying to figure out like how does having a string of bits and being able to like endlessly copy that, and it costs nothing to the owner of the content, by the way. Like, what does that mean? What is this giant Rube Goldberg machine that we've built to like keep people from being able to see the string of bits?
Yeah. A lot of our mental models for the world and the way the world is organized are fundamentally anchored around scarcity.
Yeah.
Because it's the way things in our environment that we evolved with work.
Yeah.
You can't just grow a tree and then for zero marginal cost, duplicate that tree 1 billion times in a day.
Yeah.
That's not how trees work.
Yeah.
And so it kind of breaks.
Yeah, that is, and to be clear, that is how software works.
Yeah, sorry if that was implied. Yes, that's what I was getting at, is that's exactly how software works, and it kind of breaks our mental model. Right.
Yeah.
It's not zero cost, but it is functionally zero cost, right? Netflix is maintaining servers and paying for electricity, et cetera, but marginally.
Yeah.
For every user and every instance of every view of every movie on Netflix, it is pennies, less than pennies.
Less than pennies.
So I think the thing to call out here is just how much it does not jibe with our intuitive understanding of the world and the way the world works. Where this gets extra interesting is, though, that software is increasingly dominating a larger and larger percent of our lives and a larger and larger percent of our economy. And what this is doing is I think the reason we wanted to talk about it, or at least the reason I wanted to talk about it, is not to like litigate the definition of this stuff.
No.
That's not that interesting.
No.
What is interesting to me is, in what ways are we duct taping an old system designed for cows and bicycles and trees, and duct taping it to other things that do not behave in any way, shape, or form like, what did I say? Cows or bicycles or trees.
Yeah.
And in what ways is that misfit limiting the technology? In what ways is it limiting our life and our experience of life in the world and the economy?
Yep.
In what ways is it making us poorer? And what could some alternatives be?
Yeah, I think inside of that, I think the idea that there's a limitation on the technology, on our ability to create and evolve technology, I think is one of the big effects of what you're describing, of trying to take basically this old way of viewing the world and sort of trying to map it onto this new paradigm of software and functionally free information. What's hard here is, like, I don't know what without the economic system, if it doesn't work, I don't know what replaces it, and like what it looks like to like have an economic system that takes this new paradigm into account, right? We can get into open source, which is another way that this sort of like is weird and breaks the model, right? Like, I don't know how many people know this, but like the vast majority of anything you use on your smartphone, in your browser, when you go to a website, but most of the software that you use, well, you know, if you were to like put it into percentages of like, this product is built with a certain percentage of one type of software, most of it is open source software.
Huge chunk, yeah.
Which, if you
what are going to be let's just for a second, the three things that come to mind for most people are probably going to be like Spotify, the iPhone,
yep,
and Netflix.
Yeah.
I mean, most of those things are running on servers that are going to be running some flavor of SQL that is probably an open source database.
Yeah.
The CDNs are going to be routing traffic using open source protocols like HTTP and elaborate. You're much more knowledgeable than I am on this.
So you know, the databases that these things use are most likely going to be Postgres or MySQL or SQLite, and those are all open source projects. The web servers are probably going to be either Apache, Nginx, or some other variant that are also open source. And if for anybody who's listening who doesn't know what open source software is, it's basically people who write software that is useful in some way to them or to other people, and then they publish it online to be used freely. And depending on there is a license associated with it, and depending on the license, there are some restrictions for using it. Like a GPL license has stronger restrictions on how you can use the software with requirements to publish your changes or the software that you've built around it. Like there's all kinds of different restrictions that arise from it. But for the most part, it's software that just gets published freely and for anybody to be able to use. And the reason people do it is there's some altruism and there's some just there's a collectivism to it, right? Of just like, hey, I can build this myself, but it would be much stronger if other people could contribute to it. And by publishing it and allowing other people to use it and also contribute back to it, it creates better software.
Well, I think there's also some interesting strategy behind it.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you're making a thing, whether it's proprietary or not, and you're selling it, there are often related, often necessary pieces of infrastructure or related goods and services that make your good or service at least easier to get and at most possible. And I think the example of this is roads, right? You might say, I've got a really nice ice cream shop.
Yeah.
If there's no road to get to your ice cream shop, that's going to severely limit customers' ability to get to your ice cream shop.
Yep.
Now, every ice cream shop owner can't be expected to pave every path from every customer to their store. So we rely on, public infrastructure and the common good, or the commons as it's sometimes called, in order to get consumers to the ice cream shop. Now, one quick thing on the commons, I don't know if I'm misusing that term because I think that term is often attributed to natural resources, like nobody owns all the fish in the ocean, but some percentage of fishermen harvest those fish and sell them for a profit.
Yeah.
And if we overfish all the fish and if there's no coordination mechanism amongst the fishermen, that's a big problem. I don't know if you would call roads the commons or if you would just call that public infrastructure. Either way.
Yeah. I would call it, it's a similar concept.
And the reason I bring it up is because I think that there is a business rationale for software and hardware makers and technology to open source some stuff that's not purely altruistic. So for example, Netflix might contribute to, I'm making this up because I don't know what Netflix's specific open source activity is, but they might say, hey, put one of our best engineering teams onto making video compression algorithms much better and open source that. Because if we open source that, other software developers, other hardware providers are more likely to adopt it. And if they adopt it, it's going to make it faster and easier for the video stream to land on the smartphone of the user streaming it on their Huawei phone in Shanghai. And so in that way, it's similar to the ice cream shop, either being taxed to pay for roads or donating money to some sort of public good or altruistic effect, expecting to get some return back to itself. The software developer, this came up in my research, I didn't have this from memory, but the software developer Joel Spolsky, who I believe spent most of his career working and writing at Microsoft about software development practices, wrote this famous memo in 2002 called, I don't know what it was titled, but basically the theme was called commoditizing your complement, right? So every product has complements. Things need to be purchased together, cars and gasoline. Software needs hardware, apps need operating systems. And so the idea is that it can be a savvy business strategy to commoditize your complement in order to increase either the ease with which your existing customers can buy your goods or services from you, or the ease with which new customers can come to your product or service.
So to be clear, look, okay, let's go back to the Spotify example, right? We were doing a little bit of we were trying to break down like how much of Spotify is built on open source software versus proprietary software that's built by Spotify. All of their databases most likely open source. All of their web servers that serve the traffic and serve the the content that you're actually listening to most likely open source. But if you're looking at any given company, and then the software that runs on the servers is most likely some Linux variant, which is all open source software.
Yeah.
And so if you go, it's sort of like, to use your roads analogy, it's sort of like and then there's the very thin layer on the top that is the actual software that Spotify has built to build their business, right? It's you're taking all these different little pieces and cobbling them together, and then building a little layer on the top that is your actual product. And that's, I think that's the equivalent just of the rows that you're describing, right? It's like all the things that lead up into like your product. There's this 80% layer that is just like stuff that needs to exist, that almost every company needs to be able to do, that you don't want to write from scratch every single time.
Yeah.
And so there is like a commons involved there that is just that exists to support that.
Also think of two of the most financially successful and popular operating system platforms in the world, iOS and macOS. Mm-hmm. I don't know this as a specific granular percentage, but I know some meaningful percentage of that is based on Unix.
Yeah. So there's the what's it called? There's the kernel of the operating system.
Is it Darwin?
Darwin. That's right. Yeah. So Darwin is a Unix variant, and Darwin itself is open source. Like you can contribute to the Darwin kernel.
And isn't Unix open source or not? Or is Linux open source?
We're getting a little in the weeds, but Unix is
take me there.
Unix is an operating system spec. It's not technically an operating system itself. So
I did not know that.
There are unices that conform to the Unix spec that are different, and Darwin is one of them. I think BSD conforms to the Unix spec. I think technically Linux does not conform to the Unix spec.
You're frying my brain right now.
And then so there's like that's actually but the point being that Darwin, so like the lowest level of the operating system in macOS and iOS is open source. And then that's not even, and then so that piece is open source, but then a bunch of the stuff, like the core frameworks that run iOS and macOS.
Yeah, some of them Apple themselves have open source.
Some of them Apple has open source. Some of them use open source libraries internally to for stuff that's as basic as like string processing. We'll probably be using some sort of open source library to do that kind of stuff. So like everything you touch has some form of free and open source software involved.
And I think one of the points that's interesting to me that I'm finding myself thinking about is that these are massive externalities that are almost impossible to quantify. I pulled some numbers off the internet. I don't know how verifiable they are. They sound rightish to me. They also could be off. They could be underestimates by orders of magnitude, but there's a study I pulled from the European Union. They estimated in 2018 that just European Union companies were investing approximately €1 billion a year into open source software development, meaning that for-profit companies based in the European Union were paying for payroll and benefits, et cetera, for engineers that were developing and contributing to open source projects. Yeah. And another Harvard Business School paper that I found estimated that open source software globally has contributed $8.8 trillion with a T in value. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting about that is regardless of the specific accuracy, although I read these papers and their methodology seems sound to me, this isn't like someone making something up on Twitter. Regardless of the specific accuracy, it's very interesting to think about these massive unpriced externalities that end up enabling profit and enabling financial motivation. So if Spotify, I don't think either of us would say Spotify does nothing. No. They do a tremendous amount of stuff. A tremendous amount of difficult and valuable stuff. Yeah. But I'm being very loosey-goosey here, but if Spotify is a thing and some percentage of it, let's say 20%, 40%, 60% of it, of the iceberg is open source, and the rest is worth $100 billion. I mean, I think their market cap is approximately $100 billion right now. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. That is real economic activity, real investor returns that are being driven in part by the externality of the open source community. And if in a parallel universe where open source didn't exist, Spotify would have to solve these problems again from scratch.
Let's go back to Microsoft in the 80s, where they did have to mostly write everything themselves. I think I'm remembering correctly, but like most of Microsoft's code bases for DOS were all handwritten, right? How expensive would it have been to build a company like Spotify if you literally had to write a web server from scratch, or buy it. I guess that's also an option, right? You could buy a web server from scratch. Build a web server from scratch, build databases from scratch, build proprietary audio encoding algorithms from scratch, build a UI layer from scratch, like build a whole operating system. I don't know. There's a whole bunch of different weird things that, like, would Spotify be economically viable as a business if they had to do all that from scratch?
I mean, that's a great question, because if you look at, I don't know Spotify's specific profit margins, they're probably very large. But how many technology companies operate temporarily or permanently on very, very thin margins in order to grow, in order to innovate? It's fascinating. And some of that margin might be artificial because of the externality of open source software. Another aspect here that I think on a cultural or philosophical level, I think grates both of our gears, but I don't want to put words in your mouth, is this idea that technology, specifically information technology, the exact sector that is based on bits and not atoms, where the marginal cost of duplicating it is near zero. These markets are some of the most, I was going to use the word naturally, I don't know if naturally is the right word, but these are some of the most monopolistic markets that the world has seen in hundreds of years. And it goes as far as to, there's a famous quote, something like, competition is for losers. I think that's a Peter Thiel quote. But the idea is that if you can build a monopoly and defend it against regulation, et cetera, that is the quote unquote best way, best is carrying a lot of water there, best way to generate profit is by having a captive audience with very high switching costs, very little competitive pressure, and long, durable customer bases and predictable costs of production. So monopolies are not good for all of us. Monopolies are not necessarily good for competition. Monopolies are not necessarily good for innovation, but monopolies are great for monopolists.
I would go as far as it's bad for pretty much everybody except the monopolist.
And that's, I don't know about you, but I feel like my upbringing, academic and otherwise, my upbringing, I think, involved a very strong sense of anti-monopolistic. There was a lot of anti-monopolistic energy in my education and in my culture as a child.
You're a Teddy Roosevelt acolyte, right? The trust buster.
I think so, and so this anti-monopolistic thing, I don't know if it's just me, I don't know if it's the people around me, or I don't know if it was an objective truth that a fundamental component of capitalism is competition and therefore anti-monopolistic pressure. And if you ask Peter Thiel, I don't want to put words in his mouth. I'm not him and I'm not his friend. But based on what he said on the public record, I would imagine he doesn't agree. He thinks capitalism can exist without competition and in a state of monopoly.
I don't know that I would necessarily say that he thinks that. I'm obviously not in his head. But I think what he would say is that capitalism can exist just fine with monopolies existing within it. Like, they're not incompatible with each other, which I would disagree with that. I would disagree that I think once you have a company that has achieved a monopoly in any given sector, like, you no longer have a functioning market. Like, it just doesn't. It's a broken market. Now, like I said, it's good if you want to be, like, if you're the monopolist of trying to achieve monopoly in your sector, that's great for you. Like, you're going to be very wealthy if you were able to achieve that. But it basically ruins the game for almost everybody else, which I think is the point of the game Monopoly.
Yeah, as I'm looking, you're right. As I'm looking at this definition of capitalism, I'm going through it and thinking, like, where is monopoly incompatible with this definition?
I think I think I agree with the premise that a monopoly is incompatible with a healthy capitalist system, and I'm sure somebody will debate me for that. But that's my opinion, and so we'll take that as a premise that monopoly is incompatible with a capitalist system. Software is one of the best tools ever devised for creating monopolies.
Why is that? Say more, because I'm not sure I follow.
So how do you achieve a monopoly within any given sector? You have to be able to buy up or outgrow all of your competition and push them out of business, right?
You have to outgrow, which software, because it's based on bits and not atoms.
Well, hold on. Let's go slower.
Okay.
Let's start from like let's say you have a railroad and you want to establish
And you want to build a monopoly.
And you want to build a monopoly.
Okay.
How would you do about doing that?
If I had the money, I would use that money to either merge or acquire with as many of my competitors as possible, or leverage my money to undermine the business success of my competitors.
So let's focus on the acquisition piece of it.
Okay.
So if you're trying to acquire, and when you're dealing with tangible real world assets, let's say real estate. So in a railroad, it would be
Steel, wood, coal,
it would be
land.
land. It would be right of way for the train tracks. It would be the steam engines. If you're dealing with stuff that is actually scarce, the more of it you buy up, the less of it that's available for you to buy, the more expensive it gets for you to keep buying. Right. So there's a natural limiter on how monopolistic you can actually be.
There's only so much wood. There's only so much steel.
Yeah.
There's only so much coal.
Yeah.
Okay. Great point.
So now that we've established that, right? Like, so let's say, so you have monopoly. You have monopoly that to attempt a monopoly in physical spaces is very difficult because of scarcity. Let's introduce software to the mix, where things get unfathomably cheap to be able to do. You can basically, leverage, software gives you unbelievable leverage to be able to establish monopolies inside of different sectors in a way that just wasn't possible before. So we've established that capitalism is incompatible with the idea of a monopoly being able to take over the entire market. If you all of a sudden have a tool or a machine that is a monopoly builder, wouldn't you say that that's incompatible with like the whole concept of how capitalism is supposed to work?
Yeah, probably. Are there other traits other than acquiring or undermining your competition or flooding the market with your good or service because it's made of bits instead of atoms? Are there other aspects of, I like this game of pretend you're Andrew Carnegie and you're building a monopoly from scratch. Yeah. I mean, here's one, okay?
Yeah.
Here's a different one. So what we just talked about is the inputs for your product or service are finite or scarce.
Yep.
In railroad land.
Yep.
But not necessarily in software land, or to an almost exponentially lower extent in software land.
Yeah.
The second one that's worth noting in my mind is consumers. In both worlds, consumers are scarce. They're only being born and dying at such a rate. So you can open up new markets, you can open up new geographies, et cetera. But once you acquire a consumer, the harder it is for your consumer to leave or switch to your competitor, the better.
Yeah.
So what's interesting is with physical goods and services, let's say a railroad, multiple railroads, again, because of physics and reality, multiple railroads cannot exist in the same place at the same time. So there is also a naturally monopolistic factor to, once I have the right to build a railroad track on this piece of land, it is unless someone stacks them, it's physically impossible for someone to occupy that same space and offer that same route to the same consumer. So once I've got that infrastructure built, it's going to be very hard to dislodge me without acquiring my infrastructure, right? Not so with software. You can run theoretically infinite social media apps on your phone. Yeah. And you're not competing for the physical real estate of offering your good and service. It's theoretically easier for your customers to switch and window shop. So what happens when you put in you engineer explicit dynamics that reduce the ability of your consumers to leave, make it harder for them to switch, much harder than the bits themselves would imply.
Yeah, like in with physical goods, switching is as easy as like I'm just going to go buy a different thing, right?
Yeah.
Versus with software, it's just let's back up. So to your point, railroads, once somebody owns the track and the land the track is on, like it's theirs. No one else can operate a railroad on top of that thing, and that implies a sort of natural monopoly at least over that land. Once you get into software, theoretically, because they're just bits, you should be able to just copy them anywhere, right? Like my data that exists inside of Google, I should theoretically just be able to say, okay, Google's not serving my purposes anymore. I'm going to export my data and I'm going to bring it somewhere else. But what ends up happening in the real world is that even though there's no physical law that says that is preventing me from being able to do that, it is purely out of the economic motivation of Google to make it difficult for me to leave that it happens, right? There's really literally nothing preventing that from happening, but they're able to hold my data hostage. I think that's another weird one, right? Of like, this is a stronger monopoly builder than was possible with physical space, right? With physical goods.
Yeah.
Right? Is that what you're getting at?
It's kind of what I'm getting at. I think that leads me to the natural thing of like, okay, so one writer of one railroad ticket on one day, that human cannot simultaneously take 80 railroad trips in 80 different directions. It's physically impossible. Fast forward to today, that one consumer can run 80 social media apps on their phone.
Yep.
What this naturally leads me to is that, cool, you can now functionally run infinite numbers of competitive products on the same hardware, but you can't pay attention to all of them.
Mm-mm.
So the thing of scarcity migrates from physical space, physical goods, physical energy, and goes straight past storage or processor compute time, and it goes straight to the economically valuable thing is someone's attention.
Mm-hmm.
Someone's attention is the de facto currency with which they're paying for a YouTube or a Twitter, and in lieu of dollars and cents to buy a railroad ticket from Chicago to San Francisco.
Yeah.
So that means that to me signals that attention is self-evidently the currency or the thing of value that is being fought over in lieu of scarce physical goods. Does that ring true to you or not? I'm not hyper confident in that.
I mean, I think it's true. So I think we're going like I don't think that's generally true for all software, right? Because if we're talking about, if the debate here is, does software in some way break the dynamics of capitalism in some fundamental way? What you're describing is in software that is basically free but ad supported.
Yeah.
Because there are classes of software that's not the case, right? Like if we're talking about social, that's basically the only business model that has been proven to work. If we're talking about, software as a service, as an example, right? Where you're paying for access to you're paying for access to software that will do a thing for you, like accounting software or banking software or whatever. The currency that you're trading in is not attention anymore at that level. You are taking dollars for somebody to use your software to accomplish some task.
Sure. But I would say that it is monopolistically, it is in Intuit's best interest when you're a business owner and you sign up for QuickBooks, even though you're paying for QuickBooks, they also don't do a damn thing to make it any easier for you to migrate your data to zero, for example.
Yeah.
You can, but it's, slow, lower fidelity, a lot of work. So in that way, I guess what am I saying? I guess I'm agreeing with you, and I'm now updating my prior assumption, and attention is one of several value primitives of the digital economy, of the software economy.
Right.
And
so the scarcity
data is the other.
So data. So then now we're narrowing it down to, okay, so if there's, because what we're trying to get to is basically, what is the scarce resource that's being allocated with capitalism as the mechanism within a software ecosystem?
I mean, I don't know. Like, imagine the whole stack of Intuit QuickBooks. Where's the scarcity anywhere in there?
Well, we've Well, we've identified two, right? Like if in social media, it's the attention, right? Like a single person can only have their eyes glued to the phone, ideally no more than 16 hours a day.
Okay.
Ideally.
Dark. You think we can project ads into your dreams?
You should read that Hank Green book I just suggested.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Did they do that?
I'm not telling you.
Okay.
And then on the like, let's say more software as a service side, the scarce resource is your data, right? Like it's valuable to the company for you to give them your data, and for them to basically build a trapdoor that your data goes in and it can never come out, or a Hotel California for your data.
Yeah. Back to monopolies, there's another thing that is kind of rattling around in my head, and that is in the important part of the definition of capitalism where markets allocate resources through value exchange and voluntary value exchange, right? Like if I hold a gun to your head and say, buy my apples, that's not capitalism working, right? I should want to buy your apples because they're the best apples and they're better than the guy across the street. They're either more delicious or lower price or both, right? That's capitalism. I'm going to ask a loaded question. It has nothing to do with software, but is leading up to a software, an attention economy, a software-based thing. Is a renter of a home more or less economically free than the owner of a home? And by that I mean, and by that I'm implying, is choosing to not transact the equal but opposite right or equal but opposite signal to voluntary exchange?
Well, yeah, you get into weird things. So specifically with housing, you get into weird things where it's like, is it voluntary? Like, because if you decide to voluntarily not transact in the housing market, your only other option is a tent on the sidewalk.
Not even that sometimes.
Yeah.
I think what I'm getting at here though is that like when you own something, your inaction contains information as much as your action.
Okay.
But when you don't own something and it is taken away from you automatically when you stop paying for it, right? This rent seeking, a rent-based arrangement is to me a different microeconomic beast. So for example, I think rent seeking is pretty squarely, like, it is valid economic activity.
Yeah. It
is not optimal, competitive, value creating economic activity.
Yeah.
And so I don't think this is controversial to say that any rent seeking business model, and it doesn't just have to be renting an apartment in downtown, any rent-seeking business model, while valid and while legal, and I'm not calling that into question, is less value creative than other economic endeavors.
Yeah.
And that applies not just to housing, it applies to streaming music.
Yeah.
It applies to social media. It applies to your accounting data for your business.
Yeah.
And so my point here is that in my mind, a healthy capitalist system and market is driven by complete information, consumer choice, myriad options, and the ability to say no.
Yeah.
And not every transaction in the economy works that way. I think most interestingly, and this is like it's a whole thing. It's like a sidebar. Yeah. It's like health doesn't work that way, right? Like if you are having, if you've broken your leg on the side of the road, you don't have a lot of options to get.
Yeah, you want to get to the closest place.
Right, so you don't have the opportunity. You don't really, functionally, you don't have the ability.
You're not gonna sit there on Yelp going like, that urgent care has bad reviews.
Exactly.
That ER.
Exactly.
It looks like it smells funny based on the reviews. I'm not gonna go that one.
I think this is an interesting special class that I think most people would agree with. Emergencies, genuine emergencies, are exceptions to free market capitalism. And I'll use a perfect example. There was an incident, I believe it was that terrorist attack in Paris, where a gunman shot up a music venue.
Yeah.
And a bunch of people in a panic were trying to get out of that neighborhood, and they were calling Ubers. And because it was early in Uber's history, Uber had just kind of a pure algorithmic surge pricing model.
Where it was like,
and the pricing of an Uber was thousands of euros to get out of the neighborhood. And there was this huge consumer outcry that said Uber's profiting off of a terrorist attack. Right? Now I can see very clearly Uber's side of things. That is just pure supply and demand, no human involved, just algorithmic. Enough people are asking for a ride.
Yeah, there was no guy
with a twirly mustache
sitting there looking at the news being like, shooting in the 12e arrondissement. Oh, better crank the surge pricing.
Exactly. But most people also in the press and in the aftermath would agree that that's like kind of distasteful and what a bad PR moment that might have been.
Yeah.
And if there were ways to avoid those dynamics, that should be implemented. And I think Uber did, where they put like a cap on surge pricing in an emergency. There was like a switch someone internally could flick that says if there's some natural disaster or something, we can stop this from running amok. Because of that, right? Because emergencies eliminate the ability for a consumer to act thoughtfully, to price discriminate, to comparison shop, and to say no. We start breaking down the normal functioning of a competitive market.
Yeah.
When you are digital rent seeking, when you are a tenant digitally of a service that's got all your files, got all your music, got all your movies, got all the pictures of your kids, got all of your social connections from the last 20 years of your life, whatever the situation may be.
Yeah.
And if you stop paying for it, you're locked out of it. It's taken away from you.
It's deleted.
Where does that leave consumers?
Yeah.
Certainly, reasonable people could say, well, if you want to use something that someone else built, you can be asked to pay for it.
Yeah.
But if you functionally don't have the ability, right to say no, to leave, to move, it starts to break things a little bit. Any reactions to that?
And it goes back. I mean, we've talked about this many times. This is one of my currently my white whales, right? Of like finding some way to own all of the digital infrastructure that's in my life.
Yeah.
I don't think I'll ever get to 100%.
You're a digital homesteader.
Yeah.
Like you're a digital prepper.
Yeah.
And
that's a good way to describe it.
Right?
Actually.
And I say that and I say that lovingly. For those that don't know, Julian has like a lot of very sophisticated hobbyist infrastructure in his personal possession for things like duplicating the functionality of something like a Dropbox or a Google Drive or an iTunes or a Spotify, that Julian is able to host himself, manage himself, maintain himself, debug himself, update himself, and therefore pay nobody a monthly fee to manage and maintain, other than the electricity utility and maybe the data provider.
I pay for the electricity, I pay for the hardware that I run it on. And then I pay with my time too, right? Because it is like that's the thing that's difficult now to do. Like, that's why this isn't really a choice for most people. I'm able to do it because I have the skills to like stand up these systems and run them. But it's not free, like in terms of like my time. Like I have to tend to these servers to make sure that they're running, to make sure that they're updated with the latest software. I have to make sure that they're being backed up in a way where I won't lose all my data, because that is a thing that you get when you pay a third party to do all these things. At least that's part of what you're paying for. That doesn't mean that they always get it right either. But so it's not free, but it does afford me that choice that most consumers do not have.
Something that's occurring to me is that all of your digital homesteader or digital prepper lifestyle, I don't think do you have solar panels?
I do not.
Okay, so you're not you're not off the electrical grid.
That is on the roadmap, though.
But you can, right? Like we live in a time where that is very plausible.
What's funny is I can even do I don't even have to electrify the whole house. I can literally just electrify the setup.
That's funny.
With the solar panel.
That's funny. What I was getting at though is the one piece that I don't see how you get away from quote unquote renting is access to the network.
Yes.
I mean, is that even possible?
There is, somewhat. There is some choice. It's harder with residential options, right? But I do have a choice of multiple different providers where if I don't like, let's say I don't like AT&T, I can move to Spectrum. But that's the extent of the choices, though.
Do you use AT&T for like DSL, or do you use it for like cellular 5G that just transmits a network in your house? How are you using AT&T for your...
No, that's my fiber provider.
Oh, I didn't know they offered fiber.
Yeah.
Trippy. That's an interesting piece of the stack, is the access to the network.
Yeah.
What are some signs that we might be overblowing this and that it all works? I mean, I would say the point about open source isn't purely altruism. It is companies commoditizing their complements.
Yeah, there's a few things that have come up today that where as I've talked them through, I'm like, maybe I'm overthinking this. And it does come down to there is, as much as we say there isn't choice, there is choice. Like if you really want to work hard enough to like pull all of your data out of these systems and learn how to run a server at your house, you can do that. It's way harder, and it's not really feasible for most people, but it's possible. I guess like my biggest thing is like, there's the, ever since was it Cory Doctorow that
wrote the enshittification
that coined enshittification
of TikTok, I think it is. It was a 2021 essay.
Yeah,
it's very good.
I think it's sort of like, so it's the rent seeking. It's exactly the rent seeking behavior you're describing, right? Like it's basically once you're locked into the ecosystem, you don't really have, yes, you have a choice to leave, but at the scale that these companies operate now with the software that they've built, there isn't really a choice, and they can basically take your experience and make it as crappy as they want, and they will still get paid.
Yeah,
maybe more than they were when the service was good. So and that to me just is a broken dynamic of the market, and it's enabled by software. So
I'm obsessed with externalities. I believe Mark Andreessen coined the phrase "software is eating the world." As software eats the world, and things that we never thought we would turn into software are turning into software. Mm-hmm. The deflationary pressure is so strong in a way that could create such abundance and could create such high quality of life, but that's so difficult to measure. It breaks all of our instrumentation. That's very interesting to me. I don't even really have an opinion on it. It's just interesting to me. I think about one of my favorite things in my life. It's Wikipedia. Mm-hmm. And the idea that there used to be door-to-door salesmen selling $1,000 encyclopedia sets that were out of date in a year. And that was an entire industry. And now there is freely available the best resource on almost every topic at your fingertips in as many languages as exist. That's amazing. But the fact that Wikipedia doesn't charge money means that its contribution to society is not only invisible, but if you looked at a graph from 1970 to today, if you zoomed in far enough, I don't know how big the encyclopedia market was in 1970, but if you zoomed in a little bit, on paper, it would look like value was lost.
Yeah, because there was an entire industry that got decimated, right?
Even if it was $1 million a year, I'm sure it was much larger than that.
But scholars, editors, door-to-door salesmen, that all lost their jobs because this thing appeared on the internet.
Yeah, and let's say I'd be fascinated to try to figure out real figures here, but I mean, if there are 200 million people and 50 million households in the United States of America in 1970, I'm doing this off the top of my head, and 1 in 10 of them has an encyclopedia set, and the encyclopedia set costs $1,000, which I know they were that expensive. Mm-hmm. And maybe I'm overestimating that, but adjusted for inflation, maybe not, right?
So a complete Encyclopedia Britannica set, I think would have been $1,000 in today's dollars.
And then let's say that 10% of households buys an encyclopedia set every 5 years. I'm making this up, but these are plausible. Now, these aren't like bullshit numbers. These are directional numbers.
Yeah.
So that's $1 billion a year industry.
Yeah.
And you go from 1970, $1 billion. I have no idea if that's an directionally accurate number or not. And you zoom to 2025 and it's, I'm sure, zero or close to zero. On paper, that looks like value destruction.
That looks like a net loss for the economy.
And yet we all know that the frequency and breadth and availability of Wikipedia means that more people are using quote unquote encyclopedic functions on their devices in more languages, more frequently than anyone ever used Encyclopedia Britannica.
Yeah, like anytime, like they just imagine every time that you were like, oh, I wonder what the capital of Burundi is. Like you would have to wait. You'd have to be like, okay, you're in the car at the grocery store. You're like, well, I guess I'll look it up when I get home to my encyclopedia.
Yeah.
And now it's literally just whip out your phone. Right?
Not only that, it's like usually in the top 3 search results on any search query. Yeah. It's fascinating. And this is just one clear example. Everyone on Earth knows Wikipedia.
Yeah.
What else can you apply the shape of this pattern to in the economy? I think a lot of things. So what's interesting there is like, are we undercounting GDP? Are we undercounting productivity? Are software monopolies capturing an outsized amount of profit relative to the actual value that they're creating? It's just all fascinating. And at the end of the day, this doesn't feel like a stable equilibrium to me.
No.
And this seems like one foot in the old world and one foot in the new world. And I'm curious what the new world looks like, but I'm worried the new world looks like medieval France, where a few platform owners and their shareholders own the entire stack of our civilization, and we all just are visitors here. We're all renting everything. And that feels wrong. It feels scary. And that feels wrong and scary, but I don't know how to fix it. If I did, I'd probably be very wealthy. I don't know how to fix it in a way that still jives with the capitalist framework. So I think this might be what you were getting at in the last episode when you said, is software and capitalism incompatible? The things that jump to mind kind of unimaginatively are like Star Trek economics, where there is no money and there is a nominal economy that's based on people's leisure time of choice to explore the universe for fun and do science for fun, and everybody else just gets to watch holograms and eat abundant food that gets assembled from subatomic particles. And if so, that's cool, but that's nothing looking like capitalism. It's nothing looking like communism. It looks nothing like anything we've ever thought of or seen before.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about this forever, but my biggest gripe with all of this is like there's a binary here that everybody tries to fit what the future will look like, and it's either a capitalist society or not binary, maybe a spectrum, but it's definitely a linear spectrum, right? There's on one end there's like hyper capitalism, sort of like the I'm reading Snow Crash right now, so there's like
so good.
There's like the Neil Stephenson dystopian hyper capitalist society that's Snow Crash, right? That's on one end. And on the other end, there's like hyper communism that is authoritarian and like dystopian, and then there's like socialism somewhere in the middle. Like there's like a what's it called? Is a social capitalism that's kind of in the middle, right? Like there's like a basically what most of the Nordic countries have, right?
Yeah, I don't know if that's quite right either, but
what bugs me is that like there has to be more creative things we can come up with for economic systems and just that one spectrum. There has to be something else.
I still have so many questions, and I know we've been going along. We didn't talk at all about AI. Who cares? I'm tired of it.
Oh, wait. We can close it with another hot take.
Go for it. Yeah. Hot take it away.
AI is not software.
What the hell is it then?
I think the reason, so talking this through and thinking about AI and how it's, at least at the moment, the current, well, okay, to be clear, AI, when I'm talking about AI, I'm talking about the current class of generative sort of LLM-based AI. It's so tethered to the hardware that runs it in a way that most software is not, that I don't know that you can call it software. in the same way, and the economics are different.
Oh, interesting. So you're saying that true software theoretically can run on any compatible hardware. It's decoupled from the hardware. And what you're saying is that this is like some weird hybrid that's strongly attached to.
Yeah, like the economic model, like you can, the economics of running an LLM are much more strongly linked with the hardware that it runs on, more so than most software is. This is also like a thought fart that just came out of like
Wait, that's really interesting.
Our discussion today. So
that's
like
really interesting.
My hot take that we'll close with, that we maybe talk about in a future episode, is AI
is a new species of thing.
It is not software. It is not hardware. It's some combination of the two, maybe, but I don't know what it is yet.
What? You ruined me.